Absolutely. No, thank you. Both of you mentioned two really interesting things. One of the things that Dr. Nime had said earlier on is that the coronaviruses have been discovered since the 60s. So we've known about them for, many, many years. And there are quite a number of coronaviruses. And he also mentioned strains. So this brings me to my next question, which is, people have heard that there are new strains and then there are variants. So what is the difference, between the strain and the variant? So maybe I'll just start by just addressing this and say, so a strain is kind of uh, a strain of a virus. It has really distinct properties, and there's little movements, so to speak, when in a strain. A variant is when there's actually a significant enough mutation so that it changes the genetic code. So as far as we know right now, there are three main variants of the vaccine, of the coronavirus. The one that's found in the UK, and then there's one that was found in South Africa, and then there's one that's found in Brazil. I'm sure there are other variants that are going to emit. There are going to be many, many strains because the virus itself is highly mutagenic. In other words, it changes. Like Dr. Onime was saying, it changes, it replicates, and it's going to do that. But when it replicates or changes significantly, and then it becomes a variant, then that's a bit is kind of different. So we've got three variants now, and I'm sure we'll talk about them in other questions. But I just wanted to answer that question because that's a question that came. Anybody want to talk about the strains or the variants? Add to that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so our company, Syneos, we've been studying obviously with, I wouldn't say obviously, maybe not knowing exactly what it is that I do in the background, but we've been helping with the development of the monoclonal antibodies. And so we follow very closely those variants as they occur, because that changes how well monoclonal antibodies will work, because they're based on the prevailing variant strain that at least at the time of development are causing infection. And unfortunately, the changes to at least the strains that you've mentioned, UK, actually there's a new one here in the United States in the San Francisco area that's now causing some concern. But the South African variant is actually one that's of greatest concern, simply because we're now finding that the monoclonal antibodies that have been developed based on the initial strain from Wuhan are no longer effective. And so what happens is when we develop therapies to work like antibodies or work like vaccines will eventually in helping us to develop our own antibodies, is that as viruses change their antigens, the things that we would need to recognize in order to have an immune response, it lessens the ability for these therapies to take hold or to at least have effect. And that's the downside, again, of a virus like this one, which is novel, in that when it makes a large degree of changes within its ability to infect cells, which is what it's done in three different ways, those variants that you're referring to, then that means more people are likely to become infected. So that's the transmissibility that we're concerned about. And I think the reason the South African variant is such a concern, again, not simply because it's changed its ability to be transmissible, but it's also changed its ability to hide, meaning it now can hide from our immune system, which means it will hide from the vaccine in some settings, because we've recognized from looking, so we use convalescent plasma to determine how well our monoclonals will work against certain variants. And we're finding that the convalescent plasma from folks who had previously been infected this summer no longer has the same antibody type. So that tells us now that the vaccines that we're developing may not be as effective. Again, leaning towards needing more study into how many variants there are. I joked with my colleague here locally that I think it's time that we have, kind of like we would with the weather, every week, every month, whichever is cost efficient, a way to say this is the prevailing variant that's out, so that everybody is aware before they travel or before they see family what's out in the community that they're moving into. Because if they've been vaccinated, you're going to want to know whether your vaccine was effective against a certain variant, so that again you can prepare. And I think that's where we're at now, is preparing ourselves moving forward into time against these variant strains, because there are going to be more. And I think that's the sad part of trying to develop tech and being behind the eight ball as we are because we were so caught off guard, is that the virus is doing what it ordinarily would do, which is changing rapidly. And we have to try and keep up with that rapid change so that, again, we can keep each other safe, and, change the vaccines as necessary, and understanding that at some point this virus will become endemic, in which case every year we're going to be dealing with it. And we're going to want to be able to know what variant is available for treatment so that, again, we're not giving each other shots that aren't going to be effective.
Right. I think a lot of people have been kind of concerned, and rightly so. I mean, we went through the first wave of the coronavirus, last year, and then now it just seems like such a huge spike because of all of these new variants. So, and the challenge of the variants is that, like you said, they are so easily transmitted, and because they are so easily transmitted, it's not maybe sometimes they're more lethal. It just means that more people have a chance to be able to get it, and then there's more hospitalizations, and it puts such a burden on the healthcare system. Just because it's so easily transmitted. So the question then is, you're working obviously in drug development. How is drug development changing? Are we still thinking, maybe let's say, look, 3-4 years down the line, what kinds of new innovations do we think we need to bring in to tackle this? Because this looks like it's going to be a problem down the line if we have this much change already in a year that this has been out.
Well, as I said, at some point this virus will become endemic. It's going to be part of our normal flu season. It's going to become part of everything that we'll have to think about when somebody presents with fever, with abnormal chest X-rays, with cytokines that are elevated. And so the fact that, and I think the internal, I guess sharing some internal information that's not proprietary, but we recognize that in an endemic setting with this virus, we're likely to still have 40,000 people that will lose their life to this virus annually. And that's across, just in the United States. And so, in a bad flu season, we lose about 30,000 or so folks. And we were having a bad flu season when this virus hit. And so at some point, what we recognized with the flu, and we're hopeful to have with the coronavirus, is if you've been exposed, you can take a prophylaxis and prevent, hopefully, the chances that you become severely ill. That would be the Tamiflu sort of scenario. Or if you become hospitalized, we know that we can change the trajectory of that infection by giving Tamiflu in hospital. So again, you don't hopefully become severely ill. And I think that's the therapies we're studying now currently at our company are not to treat the virus, but to treat the sequelae that comes with the virus, and more importantly, to provide some level of prophylaxis if you are exposed. Monoclonals had the for us as a company, kind of the thing we had expected to become the prophylaxis, which is you're exposed, you're a healthcare worker, you can take a monoclonal and protect yourself. And so we're hopeful that will still be the case. But there are drugs in development that actually work specifically at preventing how this virus infects cells. And I'm hopeful for those therapies, without being specific about their names. There are 3 currently that we're studying at our company. I'm currently monitoring 7 treatments. So for my pulmonary and critical care physician, we've got out of the ones I'm studying, 3 specifically that I think will work really well in the ICU. Another 4 that will work on hospitalized patients. And so there are treatments that are under development, but as the nephrologist had mentioned, it takes time. So what we want are for folks to stay safe and give us that time so that these treatments that are under development that have good promise can come to market. I think the earliest I can foresee one coming under emergency use authorization for prophylaxis would be summer of this coming year. And so we still have to make it through the winter here and the spring to come in hopes of having at least something that will minimize how sick folks will get, understanding that we can't prevent the infection without a strong enough vaccine. And more importantly, while we're trying to get to herd immunity, everybody is getting vaccinated. We'll have something that will hopefully minimize how severe, at least if you're hospitalized, how severe your illness will get. And so there are things coming. And I think that's the thing that, from a population standpoint, we all need to recognize is that at some point, coronavirus is not going to go away. It'll be with us for quite a number of years, just like seasonal flu. And so the idea that it's going to be something that we're all going to have to live with means that, from where we're at now to a year from now, the best that we can hope is that none of us get infected. in hopes, again, that the treatments that we're studying currently will be available so that if you are infected, any of our family members are affected, friends are infected, that they'll have a treatment so that, again, the gravity of illness doesn't lead towards increased mortality in patients who ordinarily wouldn't have had nothing happen to them, and they would have had, great holidays to come. And so that's where we're at. And I think from a company standpoint, we're at the forefront, obviously, of trying to make sure that we can keep people safe.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Keith. So my next question is, can you get COVID from the mRNA vaccine? So I know Dr. Landry and Dr. Linus wanted to tackle this. Can you get COVID from the mRNA vaccine? I mean, we hear about this mRNA vaccine. Can we get COVID from it? What are your thoughts?
This I will tackle very quickly just because of the interest of time. Onime has already alluded to why it shouldn't happen, because the vaccine is not actually being made from the live virus or an inactivated virus. It's just being made from the spike protein which surrounds the virus. And that spike protein is what our immunity recognizes as if it's the virus coming, and then builds antibodies against it. And that's how the vaccine actually is being made from. So a message is sent from that vaccine to our immunity, and this tells us, you know what, this is something that is not good. Make antibodies against this, and that's it. So, and as soon as that message is sent, there's nothing else, just like somebody making a phone call. As soon as the call is ended, there's no connection again subsequently after that. Once the message has been received, our immunity starts to work. So there's no getting COVID from the vaccine.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question is, are males more likely to get COVID? There's a lot of reports that, at least in literature, that males seem to get COVID more than females.
If I'm going to answer that very quickly, some of it has to do more with epidemiological question more than anything else. Are males more likely to do more dangerous things that make them come together when they drink at a pub or at a beer parlor? Maybe. And women are less likely because they are less likely to congregate. So essentially, it's more epidemiological than anything else. However, the more important question, which we knew in New York at that time, was that males, when they got it, did badly. That was really what the question was. So from a purely getting it more, it has to do with simple epidemiological events. If males are more likely to gather in a particular country, then they're more likely to get it from congregant settings. But from who gets worse, at least data seem to show that men do worse. But in recent right now, especially here in New York, I've seen that women could do equally as bad. So I don't think there's anything per se being male or female has to do with whether you're going to get it worse or get it better in any way, at least scientifically now.
Interesting. Now I want to pivot a little bit and go to a separate section and talk a lot about the conspiratory theories that we've been hearing about. And I know Unime wanted to tackle them because I heard so many about them. I get questions like, if I take this COVID vaccine, for example, am I being tracked? Is there some sort of chip or something, in the vaccine that, it tracks my movement around? And, Bill Gates talked about depopulation. I mean, is this like something real, or is this a means to depopulate us? So, Onime, I just thought you might take a few minutes really quickly just to talk about some of these conspiratory theories in terms of tracking, and if this is some sort of bigger grand play to depopulate the population, this COVID, with COVID.
Yeah, so thanks. Very, very briefly, I mean, yes, there's a lot of stuff out there and people send me videos. Some of them is so overwhelming to keep up with the amount of wrong and negative information there. What you need to ask yourself is, what is the source of information? Social media has made it so rampant now that anybody can send information to anybody, and anybody can get on a video and say anything, make some half-truths, connect dots that should not be connected, and end up with a conclusion that is just as bizarre. It will interest you to know that even in medicine, we handle evidence in layers. For those of us that are doctors here, we know that there are various kinds of studies, there are various layers, we call them levels of evidence before we accept information as being real or not. In the same, so we, even in medicine, we filter our information from whatever happens in the lab or in studies and all that. It goes through peer review. People look at it. Is the method sound? The questions they were asking okay? And did they come up with the right conclusions before it ever gets published? And when it gets published, people have opportunities to question the data and to get answers. So very quickly, no, the vaccine does not have any tracking device. It's very easy to track you. We don't need to spend so much money making a vaccine. You carry a credit card around. You have a phone. We can track you with your phone. Your car has a GPS. There are so many easy ways to track you. I'm not sure why you would go through all that trouble of trying to inject something into somebody to track them. I've also heard something about, does it make people sterile? No, it doesn't. For those of us who are Christians here, people have talked about the mark of the beast. It is not the mark of the beast. It's just a vaccine. So ask yourself, any information you get, vet the source. A lot of those ones, when I go to the website where it originated, or when I Google it, I find out that, these guys are conspiracy theorists on any vaccine, not just COVID. They have stuff to say about any vaccine that is out there. So vet your information, be careful what you listen to and what you accept. If it doesn't make sense, usually it's not true.
Thank you, Dr. Nime. So I'm going to ask one last question. And when I ask this question, I'd just like to get the audience, you have a chance to be able to raise your hand. If you want to ask a question of any of the panelists, we'll probably take about 3 or 4 raised hand questions after this. So if you have a question, Ken, I'm not sure how we do this now, but I guess you can raise your hand, and once we finish this next answer, then we can get you. So if you have already had COVID, do you still need to take the vaccine? So perhaps Dr. Linus or Dr. Lanre or Nime can answer. If you have already taken COVID, if you already had COVID, do you still need the vaccine?
The answer is yes.
Go ahead. Yes.
I would make a short answer in the sense that if you do take you've had COVID before, your immunity comes as a natural immunity. The natural immunity probably will last about 6 months averagely based on published data from the New England Journal. However, when you have the vaccine, your immunity is more likely to last longer because you have an immunity that is based on various variants that may even occur from the change in the virus. So for example, the virus is more transmissible, but is still going to be, that variant will still be immune. We can still have an immunity against it when we get the vaccine. However, I will add a corollary there. When you get the vaccine, based on experience that I already have for my patients, you may have a more significant immune response when you get it. So for me that I got 2 vaccines, because I didn't have a previous infection, all I felt was maybe my arms sore or maybe a little bit of tired. But for my colleagues who had had a previous infection, they may have developed a fever, a body ache, something a little bit more severe, because it's a sign that immune response has recognized this from previous and they are now getting it a second time. So that's the short answer.
So something that I think, Larry, when you have, I'm sure people are wondering, how soon can I get the vaccine after I've had COVID? Right now, the recommendation is that after you wait 10 to 14 days after you've tested negative to get the COVID vaccine.